This episode is sponsored by the Catholic Financial Planners Network. Is an unrestricted free market the economic system handed down to us from on high? And what is the Catholic view of an economy? And how is that different than what you might hear from, say, Dave Ramsey? Find out on this episode of The Catholic Money Show.
Oh, this episode is going to be a doozy. Because I
It
think
sure has been.
Is this the third time we're recording this episode?
It might be.
I'm pretty sure. The first time we tried to record it, the kids interrupted a ton. We were recording it when we were out east in an RV. Mm-hmm. And the kids were up watching a movie, and we were trying to record it. They interrupted. I think that whole process took us about 45 minutes. Then we got into about 20 minutes worth of arguments. Then we finally hit record. We killed it. We had an hour-long episode that was incredible. And then somehow it got uploaded onto the interwebs.
And half got uploaded.
And then it got eaten.
Man.
It disappeared.
It got eaten.
The software destroyed it. We tried for weeks to resurrect it, to find it, to get the
files, and
they're lost.
They're gone.
They're lost. But if we have learned anything over the years, it's typically that the most important things we do and the most important conversations we tend to have end up going up against a mountain of resistance. So for whatever reason, I think this conversation is going to have some big impacts on at least somebody who hears it and listens to it.
Maybe you.
Maybe you. And I don't think it's any coincidence that we're having this conversation about economics so close to a U.S. election. And so there could be some resistance just right there in that very fact. So here we are, third time's a charm. We're hopefully going to dive into the topic of economics, the economy, whatever you want to call it. And the church has a whole lot to say about this. And Jonathan has done the legwork of the research. And in this episode, we're really going to have you be presenting the research that you've done to me. And then we're just going to dialogue about it. And I'm going to ask questions. No, we've already done this a couple times before, but we're going to pretend that it's the first time. It has been
a little while since the last time. So
yeah, and it's really, it's
an
enlightening conversation. And there's a lot to unpack. So there we go.
All right. Well, we're going to start this off. It's kind of a continuation of that series where we are looking at what gets presented on the Dave Ramsey radio show and then contrasting that with what is presented in church teaching, in the life of the church, in the catechism, in the lives of the saints, in encyclicals, all of that. So we're going to start off with that, but I'll say this. Now, if you do ever listen to Dave's show, he's not going off all these kind of theoretical treatises on the nature of economics. No. Most of the time. He's answering people's questions and getting really practical. So I had to do a fair bit of digging to find something. And so a lot of what I'm going to say maybe here about Dave is it's based on a couple interviews here and there, a rant on the radio here, an interview question there.
It's kind of sandwiched in between the other
all the other things. Tackles. Yeah. So I wouldn't say he's maybe had a chance, or maybe I haven't run into where he fully walks out and enunciates his whole view on all of this stuff. So I'll say that from the get-go, and I'm just gonna take over the mouse and our notes.
I keep clicking
Amanda
stuff.
Keeps making them crazy.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Continue.
All right. So I imagine also that even the things I have found, he has maybe a more nuanced view than he's able to communicate in the soundbite that he's given in the on the radio or in a YouTube interview, things like that.
So you're saying you're giving a rather generous benefit of the doubt, but he's also not coming from a Catholic perspective, which has thousands of years of perspective on the topic of economics. So while he likely has more to say, he's not going to have as much to say, maybe, as the
Yes.
Catholic position on this.
Yes, that's good. Yes. So we're going to start off with a couple things he said, use that to transition into the larger conversation of what
does the
we
church
found
teach
that
you?
the church says. And that's not to say that everything that we then go into about what the church says, that Dave's against or has said something in opposite of it or anything like that. Yeah, so we'll just start there. Great.
Let's do it. Let's dive in.
All right. So what I have found, right, it was some interviews he's done online. He said he has described himself as an economic libertarian, and he said, I prefer the free market punishing people that misbehave rather than the government trying to fix everything. He's complained about the CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
A lot of letters.
A number of these things, and it's a pretty typical point of view that you get from him on a number of topics, usually money related, that just let's get the government completely out of the way and let people take care of it, which maybe isn't the worst plan, but there needs to be a little bit deeper of a plan. And even
the church kind of
even in his
has
rant
that
about the
both and.
CFPB, he does also kind of come back around, and he does, I think, say, maybe without admitting it, that there are maybe some good laws and some good regulations and things like that. But I want to come in here and say that I guess you kind of can take this. He has a very individualistic worldview that when you dial it down, you distill it down, and you could kind of think of it as, your economic successes or struggles depend entirely and solely upon your work ethic on a free and unfettered free market. And that market will, by its nature, provide for those participating in that market in the best way. And we're not here today to argue for communism or socialism or even capitalism or anything like that, it's the end-all be-all answer. I think it's irresponsible, though, to act like an unrestricted free market is what best serves humanity. But don't take my word for it or my stumbling words. Let's look to see what the church teaches about this.
And before anybody comes on and says, well, capitalism is the best we've got comparatively to everything, just know, maybe so, but this side of heaven, we are never going to construct perfect governments, perfect systems, perfect anything. Everything is going to always have flaws because those creating it are flawed. And the best we do, that's all we can do, is just constantly doing the best we very, very can. And the church herself has spoken about all of those isms you just spoke about.
And we'll hear some of that later.
Maybe some of the pros that might be there, but also the drawbacks and the cons and the ways that these isms could be applied more virtuously. So that is what we're going to now unpack.
Well, I guess maybe one more little thing is, if Dave was here and we're having this conversation with him, I think maybe at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, he'd probably be like, yeah, I think that's pretty much what I was saying. But this opportunity to go deeper, to say more of it, and in better detail, I think is a very important thing for us to do, so we properly understand why we believe certain things or why we should handle our money a certain way, and help inform us as we go out into the market and conduct our business.
Yep. I guess I want to ask first, John, is just, why does the church speak into economic matters at all? A lot of times people will say, okay, the church, I understand. She's speaking into faith and morals, which most people then think of as applying to certain categories.
Yes.
Religion, worshiping, maybe, sexuality, different types of things that they put under the umbrella of faith. But then economics, really, does the church really have any authority to even speak into this? It seems secular, it's worldly, it's governmental. Why does the church think she has why would she have the audacity to even declare a stance on anything economic whatsoever. And I think there's a lot of people who might be just scratching their heads asking that question of, what do you mean the church has so much to say on this? How could it be?
Well, the church answers that question directly in the catechism. If you've got yours at home, you want to play along, it's paragraph number 2420, and it says, the church makes a moral judgment about economic and social matters, quote, when the fundamental rights of the person or the salvation of souls requires it, end quote. In the moral order, she bears a mission distinct from that of political authorities. The church is concerned with the temporal aspects of the common good because they are ordered to the sovereign good, our ultimate end. She strives to inspire right attitudes with respect to earthly goods and in socioeconomic relationships. So the church teaches about money and economics and has something to say here because it affects our souls. The way we handle our money and treat each other through it determines what happens later, and what kind of people we are. So
Determines what happens later? What?
heaven and hell, our salvation.
Just trying to figure out where you're getting at there.
Yeah, you want to be a goat or a sheep. The way we handle our money is going to play into that.
The temporal aspects and ultimately the common good. Because these things ought to be ordered to the sovereign good.
Yes,
our ultimate destination.
Everything in our life should be ordered toward our end, which is heaven. You probably can't see it, but real success is ending up in heaven. The way
Your grandpa's motto, our motto.
Maybe your motto too now. The way I parent our kids should lead them and me to heaven. The way I treat my next door neighbor should lead us to heaven. Everything is looked at through that scope, and certainly our economics and the way we use our temporal goods can play into that.
And even if those in charge of making laws, etc., are not of the Christian faith, the church is even striving to inspire, this says, right attitudes with respect to earthly goods and socioeconomic relationships. Because even if someone doesn't share our faith that is in those positions of authority, they can still understand what might be the common good. If they really look down to it, what is the collective common good? Maybe not what's good for this group of people or just that group of people, but the common collective good based on wisdom and science and history and context and all of that. That is what the church is trying to speak to and try to get people to order their decisions towards when they're making economic policies.
So let's get into a little bit. It's a fun little tension, I think, in our faith. We've got the universal destination of goods, which when you go to the catechism, this 2400 section, which is right when you start getting into talking about money and economics and goods and things like that, it starts right off by talking about how everything was given to everyone in the beginning, and we should have use of the goods of the earth and the things that come of it, all of us. And so you've got that and this weird kind of like everything kind of belongs to everybody, but then we've got personal property rights and how do those work together. So 2403...
Private property or personal property, are they interchangeable?
I'd say interchangeable,
Okay.
though private property is probably the more like technical term for it.
Okay.
Because it belongs, privately to an individual. The right to private property, acquired or received in a just way, does not do away with the original gift of the earth to the whole of mankind. The universal destination of goods remains primordial, even if the promotion of the common good requires respect for the right to private property and its exercise. So even if it's works out better for everybody, right? That you can't break into my house and steal the food that I'm going to eat tomorrow. It doesn't negate the reality that we need to be caring for one another and that everything was given to us all.
And then in certain situations, the food given to me ought to be shared with those who maybe are about to die or something and need some food. And we could get into the hypotheticals and with application on the universal destination of goods. But I do want to the church is so often both and. She is so often just threading that needle. Jesus says, to be my disciple, you walk the narrow path. It isn't wide and open to everybody. It's narrow. And to teeter right there on that thin line of respecting both the universal destination of goods and private property is right where we're supposed to be in our economic stance. But I would say most times, and we see this around us, there are voices or perspectives or influences that want to just pull you to one far extreme or the other.
Yeah. So as far as kind of an economic model, sometimes you can kind of look at those extremes. Maybe we get rid of just kind of anarchy and everybody just does whatever. We kind of have our, total unrestricted free market on one side, and then the very planned, centrally planned kind of, communism, socialism kind of a thing on the other side. And the church has some things to say about all of them. So in this little section here, we're going to continue on with the catechism and some of the critiques that it offers, or warnings maybe more, of all of these things. So we're going to start off by picking a bone with capitalism.
Oh, okay. Let's go
And
there.
just when you think we're crazy lefty commies, in comes the follow-up punch for
about
the other
communism.
guy.
So stop.
Yeah, so just take a breath. Don't turn it off halfway through this, okay? All right. This is 24-24, and then I'll go into 24-25. A theory that makes profit the exclusive norm and ultimate end of economic activity is morally unacceptable. The disordered desire for money cannot but produce perverse effects. It is one of the causes of many conflicts which disturb the social order. A system that subordinates the basic rights of individuals and of groups to the collective organization of production is contrary to human dignity. Every practice that reduces persons to nothing more than a means of profit enslaves man, leads to idolizing money, and contributes to the spread of atheism. You cannot serve God and mammon. Take a little break right there. Okay, then.
Very serious words.
Absolutely.
Very serious words.
And I think, unfortunately, it seems that we're doing this a lot these days. Thinking about, because when I read this, I'm just like, oh, man, I don't know how well I'm living up to this. Because the people, like the people, the real people who assembled my computer, who sewed my clothes, who picked the food, like, how are they being treated? What is their relationship to me? Are they in this big machine of the market just being used as a means of profit?
Perhaps.
And how do I square that with how I live my life and everything? Ugh.
It's tough.
I don't know.
No, it's
something
tough.
to really think about.
I think people are waking up to that reality. Certainly, yeah, there was kind of a heyday of, things are getting cheaper and we can just buy all these things. And then our pastor a couple of years ago gave a homily hitting at this a little bit. And kind of those questions you're posing yourself of who's actually paying the price there? Because we know you can't just get a shirt, a quality-ish shirt for $12. Who actually paid the price there? And it's, those uncomfortable questions of there was somebody else on the other side of this that maybe wasn't paid at all. And I got a good deal, but they got the raw end of the stick here. And I just, this is not saying that capitalism is not good. It's not saying that whatsoever, but it is saying that a theory that makes profit the exclusive norm and ultimate end. And there are certainly those who want to take capitalism and that they want it to do just that. They want it to be all about the profits. And we have seen what that has done in our society. We're seeing companies right now who are literally in some ways worshiping the profit margin, worshiping profit and the ultimate shareholder meetings, and profits got to be going up. And just this idea of, we're going to pay the CEO $73 million this year, but we're because profits were so good, but we are going to have people on our payroll that aren't going to even be able to keep a roof over their head, groceries on the table, and lights on with the wage that we're going to pay them. Like there's something really twisted there that is, and the church is critiquing that and saying that there's something very warped there, and all kinds of evil go along with disordered use of money.
Yeah, profit's not a bad thing.
Nope.
We'll come back to this quote in just a little bit, but it says later on that those like running businesses have an obligation to consider the goods of persons and not only the increase of profits. It doesn't say the good of persons and not the increase of profits. That just can't be the only thing. It even says that profits are necessary so that you know you're making the right investments, that you're doing the right thing in your business.
Yeah, and good examples of this would be a company who's maybe having record profits, and instead of just sliding it on into the CEO and the shareholders' pockets, they're actually making investments to do some improvement in the business, or they're expanding the product line, or they're deciding to pay other workers down the lines of production more. They're giving them raises. A good example of this, a really beautiful example of this, I believe was Arizona Iced Tea. I forget. I saw this interview several months ago where
Arizona Iced Tea. Where's that?
I maybe I'm making this wrong. It's on our social media. We can link to it.
More.
But essentially, he was being interviewed, and they asked, like, why haven't you raised prices? Over the last few years.
That can's been 99 cents.
That can's been
as
99
long as I can
cents.
Remember.
And
Is it still? It might be a little
everybody, all these businesses jumped on the bandwagon of inflation, and now we actually know that many of them inappropriately inflated prices, and they also shrunk the goods that they put into it, again, for the sake of obsession over profits. And they had record profits on the backs of American people, actually all over the world, but that really couldn't even afford the goods to begin with, the basic goods. So there was certainly immorality that went on there, but when asked, like, why haven't you just raised prices? And he said, you know what? We're debt free. We're doing good. Like, it doesn't serve a purpose. We're a healthy company. We're doing well. Like, why would we raise prices just to raise prices? Why not take that and just keep prices where they are and actually bless the end consumer and not raise prices on them? Because I sat back and thought, is he Catholic? Because what he just said sounded a little bit like this.
Interesting. I heard a little bit about this in the podcast about Costco, that they cap their profit margin at certain levels. And so essentially that means if they then can get something cheaper, well, then that just makes the price at the store cheaper. And it really does get passed along. They can find out, okay, maybe the cost of this material has gone down. Let's see if we can get a lower price for the good now. And that, so I can lower the price for the consumer instead of, maybe I can get that better price. We can get a little bit more profit.
Get a little more profit margin.
It's incredible, as I'm listening to things about, shareholder meetings and all that with publicly traded companies, it's always focused on more profit. Not just profit, but are we making more than we ever did before? Have profits gone up? A company can say, hey, we made profit of, $200 million this year. And then they're like, well, I was really hoping for 220. So
like they would be disappointed if it did anything but go up the next year.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like you still made a lot of money. All right. So
yeah, when it's the exclusive norm, it can cause disorder. I'm sorry, I was trying to read something there. Disorder, perverse effects, and can cause conflicts which disturb social order. Okay.
Let's move on, though, to our friends on the other side of the aisle, or spectrum, rather.
I had one more thing I want to say, but I'll wait.
Okay, great. It says that, so you're thinking, okay, all right, maybe this capitalism thing isn't so good, so then communism?
No.
The church continues in the very next paragraph. The church has rejected the totalitarian and atheistic ideologies associated in modern times with a communism or socialism. Well, all right, there with that.
Rejected. It didn't say that about capitalism.
Rejected.
There were critiques.
All right.
There wasn't a rejection.
She has likewise refused to accept in the practice of capitalism, individualism, and the absolute primacy of the law of the marketplace over human labor. Regulating the economy solely by centralized planning perverts the basis of social bonds. Regulating it solely by the law of the marketplace fails social justice, for there are many human needs which cannot be satisfied by the market. Reasonable regulation of the marketplace and economic initiatives in keeping with the just hierarchy of values and a view to the common good is to be commended. I feel like that sums up probably this whole episode. Maybe we should have just read that and hit stop.
Let's just read that last sentence.
Here's our 20-second podcast episode.
Reasonable regulation of the marketplace and economic initiatives in keeping with the just hierarchy of values and a view to the common good is to be commended.
Bingo.
AKA socialism, communism, you out. Capitalism with virtue.
You better behave yourself.
Virtuous capitalism. That means, it has boundaries in etc. Not viceful capitalism. That is to be commended. And that's pretty much what we're aiming for, but it doesn't always happen. It certainly doesn't happen. We see a lot of vice-driven capitalism instead of virtue-driven capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So the virtue's in the middle, right? An unrestricted free market letting the invisible hand of the market control everything is not going to work. That's how you get child labor. That's how you would get incredible amounts of drugs flooding in to places, right? Because there's no law regulating any of that or outlawing any of it.
Poison in our food.
It's how you get all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we need some regulation. Now, over-regulation, well, then nothing's going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
There's no new stuff. There's no incentive to try anything.
It's too expensive to even produce anything at all.
Yeah, it takes 10 years just to build a house because there's so many regulations to go through. There's a balance that needs to be met. I want to come back here and look at some of the bits here. Because we talk about when we look at these two players, or these ideas of kind of socialism and capitalism and communism and capitalism and all that, we can look at like the state and then the people, or capital and labor. And so we're going to come back and kind of look at those two and see what the church says about these ideas of these entities after this break. I'd like to introduce you to our sponsor, the Catholic Financial Planners Network. CFPN financial advisors prove that you can make great investment returns by doing wonderful things with your money. These advisors are not just numbers people. They're faithful Catholics who actively improve the finances of their clients. They help you make wise financial decisions that benefit you and reflect our values of stewardship and charity. To find an advisor who shares your financial and spiritual values, follow these steps. 1. Search CFPN's growing directory of certified financial planners. 2. Discuss your goals and values with a few potential advisors and find one you'll love working with. 3. Begin and start walking towards a brighter future for you and your family with the right advisor by your side. Whether it's saving for retirement, funding education, or navigating taxes, they're here to support you every step of the way. Visit CatholicFinancialPlanners.com to learn more about how CFPN can help you reach your goals while staying true to your values. That's CatholicFinancialPlanners.com. Welcome back. We are talking economics and the faith. We are jumping in now, continuing on in the Catechism, and looking at what it tells us about maybe the role that the state or capital, or even us lowly labor, should play. So let's get into it. I'm just gonna. A lot of this, maybe this episode is certainly a bit different from some of our others, because it's a lot of just like, well, here's the Catechism, blah 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 blah. But that's the best way to do it. I mean, I'm not going
What
to
do you
say
want to
it's
hear?
better.
My thoughts?
Yeah, like
I mean,
this is what the church
maybe,
teaches.
but
I'm
wanna...
at least going to give you that first, so you know the real story, and then I'll say something. Here we go. All right, 2431. The responsibility of the state. Economic activity, especially the activity of a market economy, cannot be conducted in an institutional, juridical, or political vacuum. On the contrary, it presupposes sure guarantees of individual freedom and private property, as well as a stable currency and efficient public services. Hence, the principal task of the state is to guarantee this security, so that those who work and produce can enjoy the fruits of their labors and thus feel encouraged to work efficiently and honestly. Another task of the state is that of overseeing and directing the exercise of human rights in the economic sector. However, primary responsibility in this area belongs not to the state, but to individuals and to the various groups and associations which make up society. I'll continue on near the 33.
Okay.
Access to employment and to professions must be open to all, without unjust discrimination, men and women, healthy and disabled, natives and immigrants. For its part, society should, according to circumstances, help citizens find work and employment. All right, so the state, what was the state supposed to do?
What
here?
are the state's
Make it possible
obligations? Yeah.
for people to do their thing. So,
They're responsible for the things that we just talked about.
yeah.
This is on them. This is not on you or I to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. A currency that you can trust is going to be worth something tomorrow and next month and next year, so that when I do engage in business, I can accept this currency and make it easier. I don't have to trade a bunch of stuff or whatever. And I can spend this currency, and it all works because we all trust that the dollar is going to be accepted next week and next month. And maybe next year I might have to do $2, but it's still dollars at least.
Interesting that they included efficient public services.
Well, think about it.
I'm kind of joking. You know, the mail is fine.
Yes, we hope that they are efficient.
But sometimes it's going to the DMV, the pinnacle of inefficiency. Going to a government website. Oh boy.
Going to the Vatican website. But think about it. It is very important, right? If especially as our market is bigger and bigger, right? The ability for us to mail things to people and know they're going to get there allows us to engage in economic activity.
We need that system in place.
And for those deliveries to happen, or for me to get to a business, having roads that are navigatable are important. So having utilities that are reliable is very important for business. So there's some stops here. Now it's to do what needs to be done so people can do their thing. And that's it, right? It even goes here, hey, all right, you need to oversee and direct the exercise of human rights in the economic sector. Make sure people aren't getting ripped off, taken advantage of. The government can help there, but it is up to us. We bear the primary responsibility to do that, to not rip people off, to help people out if we see they need help, to be wise consumers when we're out there. I thought that was interesting.
So individuals kind of bear a responsibility as there as well. If we're not going to have this over-regulation, we need to be, especially, Catholic business owners need to be running our businesses in such a way that is respectful to human persons and to customers, etc. We bear some responsibility there as well, and different groups and associations have a responsibility in this too.
Yeah, I thought that was good. And then I think the last part, I guess there's some people who might want to argue with some of that, but sounds really good to me. Everybody should be able to work. Great. Works for me.
Well, and the church is also saying here, you know, unjust discrimination against. You cannot discriminate based on somebody's male or female. I'm not talking about cis and trans. I'm not talking about that. The church doesn't say that. Healthy or disabled, Native and immigrants. I mean, the things that people traditionally looked at and maybe made judgments and discriminations about. But today, we've gotten to a point where there's so many little other things that they want to say you're discriminating against that maybe as a faithful business owner, like you actually are not going to extend an offer in your business to somebody who stands for everything against your faith believing. And you're not discriminating. You're just saying the people that work here, we have different moral code that we subscribe to. And that's okay. And the state ought to respect that. But we've, of course, gone into a lot of conflict in those types of things. And they're calling that discrimination instead of just a business owner living their business in alignment with their faith.
Yeah. Well, speaking of
anyway,
owners and employers and all that, let's continue. 2432. So this one actually looks like I think it maybe came before, but it seemed to make more sense to put it in that order. Anyway, it says, those responsible for business enterprises are responsible to society for the economic and ecological effects of their operations. They have an obligation to consider the goods of persons and not only the increase of profits. Profits are necessary, however. They make possible the investments that ensure the future of the business, and they guarantee employment. So if you're this highlights one of the main goods of a business is providing employment for others. That's a big responsibility. That's giving that person an opportunity to provide for themselves and their family through their work. Mm-hmm. Up earlier, it talked about, hey, the state needs to, make sure things are working so people can enjoy the just fruit of their labors, that they actually take enough of that fruit home instead of the government taking it through undue and overtaxation, that they can use it. And running a business, or even just maybe you don't own it, but maybe you're in management or something. You're there at a little bit of a higher level. You are playing a role in other people generating and enjoying the fruit of their labors. That's incredible.
It's a huge responsibility.
Yeah. Golly.
A huge, tremendous responsibility to have people relying on you for their wages. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be the engine that kind of runs their family's mission.
Like, man, I don't know if this is going to come out the right way.
Oh, boy.
Or, come out well enough to be as cool as it is in my brain.
I've been down this road a couple times. I already know the answer. I'm just kidding. Okay, go ahead.
I love you too. All right, so, and of course it's different. But when we go to the sacrament of confession, the priest is this instrument of grace through which our Lord works to forgive our sins. And in the beginning, right, this is kind of some of this universal definition of goods thing. It's we are given the earth to subdue, to use, to provide for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so, in a way, when we go to work, that employer, through the employment opportunity, through the work being provided, is this instrument, certainly not sacramental, but this instrument through which God can work to bring about this bounty that this person can produce from the goods of the earth. Whether that's very direct goods of the earth or indirect, they've been, modified and manufactured, blah, 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 or through service. But that is
I liked that.
That was
good.
Wild.
That was a really good analogy.
Wow.
Wow.
And it's so when you think of that, and this is what it's saying here about, an obligation to just consider the goods of the persons, not just the increase in profits. The profits, they're a sign that things are going well in the business. They can't be, they're not the end.
And they're guaranteeing that this business can continue. And that
Yes.
provides security for everybody working for the business.
And the business, I don't know.
You're getting too.
I don't know if it is. I wouldn't. Anyway, the business exists, yes, to produce its thing and to serve people and all that. It also exists to provide the employment for those people.
Oh, yeah.
And so you've got to think, if this is it, this is the way this person is bringing forth the fruit of their labor, what should that fruit be? I don't think it should just be, it should be just a paycheck, right? This is, I was struck. I thought it was incredible. When I worked at the Catholic radio station in town, now maybe, pay's not always the best when you're working at the church or whatever. But one thing I thought was extraordinary is they fully covered health insurance. They paid, their bit. They paid, I don't think there was like a monthly premium. And then even whatever we paid up to like the deductible, they reimbursed. So they took care of it. That was, and they said, we just want to take care of our people. I thought, there we go.
That was beautiful.
That's a way to do business.
None of us knew that we were about to adopt a child that would end up in the NICU for a month.
But boy, was that great helpful.
It was a real way of living out that responsibility of their staff and their employers. Actual employees. I'm blanking right now. Maybe you can put it in the show notes. There was an encyclical that JP2 wrote. Centesimus Animus. My Latin.
Yes, on the 100th anniversary of Rerum Novarum.
But he literally goes into describing the obligation of employers, and what you just said is not off. It's not off. Actually, he really, really goes into that responsibility. And of course, I read it when I was part of a mastermind a few years ago of obviously entrepreneurs, because that's part of our vocation. It's actually part of our vocation and how we live our vocation. In that way, it does matter on if we are answering the call that God's given to us in our life. So anyway, that's not everybody's call, but employees have a responsibility back to the employer as well to
work.
To work honestly
well.
and justly and all that.
I know it's somewhere. I don't think it's in the notes for today. It's somewhere in all the stuff I've read, but there's something in there too of like the responsibility to work and like they say it of course in a better way, but like not slack off at work, to not like steal time from your employer, to be just in the work that you're giving.
Yep. Well, even earlier it talked about the state has that obligation. I forget where it was now, but essentially it made me think of Social Security and how it's not right to take wages from people when you're never going to actually come good on that.
Because
you're just
they gonna run out before
it's going
we're
to be
old?
stolen from you. That's actually immoral. It is. They can't do that, but they're going to.
Anyway. Are you saying that you think Social Security in and of itself is immoral, or that because it seems that unless they do something drastic, it's going to run out, so we will never see a benefit?
I think that is a conversation entirely separate, and we could probably dive in on that from 19 different angles. I don't feel like I am prepped to say
neither am I.
what I really think about that. I don't know if everybody would have so much mixed feelings on it if it actually did what it was supposed to do, or if it even performed half as good as if you had taken that money and put it in the market yourself. There's so many things wrong and broken with it that I don't think as it stands today it's functioning in a healthy way, and the state owes us better.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that, yes, better. If they don't change things and actually have a plan for the money to come back to people in that reasonable way, that is stealing. 100%. All right.
Let's continue.
Moving on.
Let's continue. So there's another section. That's a 2400s.
You love the 2400s.
I love the 2400s in the Catechism. Man, it's so good. But let's pop back a little bit to the 1880s or so.
Let's do it.
And this is a section going into, I mean, man, if you love organization and you haven't read the Catechism, I think you're in for a real treat, because boy, is that sucker organized. There's the sections, then there's parts, and then sections and chapters and articles, and then like
paragraphs,
something else that's not even labeled, and then paragraph numbers. It's great. And so this is from the very beginning of Part 3, Life in Christ, Section 1, Man's Vocation, Life in the Spirit, Chapter 2, The Human Community, Article 1, The Person and Society, subsection that's not labeled, 1, The Communal Character of the Human Vocation.
Poetry.
Come on, man.
Poetry.
There's a
lot of
big
sections
chunk
there.
here that I have pasted in here. I'm not reading it. I bolded some of it, but again, it's also good.
So go read it all.
No,
what are the
I'm gonna read
sections
the
we're
bold
going to go
bits.
into? Okay.
So 1883.
Not you read it all. Them read it all.
Oh, yeah, they should read it all for sure, yeah. And I'll paste as much as I can.
We're 46 minutes into this thing. We got to...
It'll go in
only
the
bold.
show notes. If you want to read all this, I'll paste it all into the post on our website, so you don't have to click everywhere to find it or flip around in pages. I'm just going to kind of copy and paste everything that we have in front of us here. Okay. But it talks about socialization, and this is getting to an interesting. This is going to help kind of bring back. I was like, oh, how do we balance this? Of okay, private property, people doing their thing. There needs to be some regulation. We need to be able to organize some things so it can all work. How do we figure out how that works? So we're going to look at this. 1883. Socialization also presents dangers. Excessive intervention by the state can threaten personal freedom and initiative. The teaching of the church has elaborated the principle of subsidiarity, according to which a community of a higher order should not interfere in the internal life of a community of a lower order, depriving the latter of its functions, but rather should support it in case of need and help to coordinate its activity with the activities of the rest of society, always with a view to the common good. So
this is a very Catholic principle, subsidiarity.
This is a way to say the federal government shouldn't screw or make decisions that the states are more equipped to make.
Because they are with their people.
And the states shouldn't make decisions and laws that counties are more equipped and better knowledgeable to make. And counties shouldn't make laws that towns, boroughs, townships, however your thing is set up, are more better to make. And they shouldn't make laws and rules that families should be in charge of. And in some ways, I guess, too, families shouldn't do it for individuals. So we work all our way down. The decision should be made at the smallest, most local level possible. Now, we do need some rules and laws and regulations at high levels, maybe even the top level, right? A speed limit on the highway that would change every town you go through. No, thank you. I am very happy that is regulated by the state. Right. Or at least the county.
Then it seems like, sometimes when you go from an interstate into a city, they're just waiting there behind a
I think
bush
maybe it is by county. Because we do go into that next county south of us, and it's like, it does drop, and they do have a guy sometimes. But yeah, so that's good. Some of these, some laws regarding things, it's helpful that they are the same all over the country.
Right.
I know I can trust something the green light means go.
Everywhere. That's helpful.
And that's
to the common
everywhere. That's like worldwide.
Oh, really?
I think everybody's in agreement on that if they have
it's helpful.
lights. That's super helpful because that's directly related to safety.
And can you imagine if all of us had our own versions of what that meant?
Oh my gosh.
Accident City, you would never drive around.
You'd be terrified. I'd be terrified.
It'd be the worst.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that certain things get punted up, but more things ought to be punted down when it's better.
Yes.
Better decided as the smallest level possible. An incredibly Catholic principle this is. And, this is where a lot of conflict exists today on how to solve problems. But the church is always going to advocate for this principle of subsidiarity, that if we can make it work at the smallest level possible, let's try for that always. And only if we've got to go higher do we.
Yeah. We see this in the church, too.
Yes, we do.
There's canon law and all, the regulations and all that regarding the liturgy even, or all sorts of different things. And that's at the worldwide level. And then we go into the next level of authority would say be maybe the bishops' conferences of particular countries. And some of them may be band together for a regional thing, right? So that's how the United States Catholic bishops have said, these are the feast days in our diocese, right? Yep. I don't know. There's the feast day that we have that's obligation. We didn't have to do it because we were out of the country. We didn't have to go.
It's in December.
Yep.
The Immaculate Conception.
Immaculate Conception, thank you. So the Immaculate Conception here in America is a holy day of obligation because it is the feast, or for us, solemnity, related to our patron of Our Lady, the Immaculate Conception.
But we were on a boat in the Bahamas.
Yes, so we weren't in that jurisdiction anymore, and we were now subject to the local authority, and it's not a day of obligation.
Now we tried,
which was helpful because we went to church.
Shut
We went to the church, and there wasn't anything going on, and the doors were closed. So we have that, and then you even have Omaha says, you know what? Ascension. Sorry, we have the United States Catholic bishops say.
You mean Assumption?
No, the ascension
okay.
of Jesus into heaven after the resurrection. You know what? We want as many people to be able to celebrate that as possible. We're just going to move that to the next Sunday instead of the Thursday that it's usually on. But then
the Assumption
you go down.
Is a day of obligation, though.
Yeah. But the Ascension.
Yeah. But
is obligation, but we want more people to get to it or whatever. All right. But in Omaha and a couple other places, they go, you know what? We really like it on Thursday. We're going to keep it on Thursday. And they go, that's cool. That's smaller for you. You can do it.
Is that the one? Because we had a friend move here from out of town, and she
had
she had never in her entire life it had been
Ascension
during a weekday.
On Thursday. Yeah.
Okay, that was the Ascension.
Yeah, that's
I
the
thought
Ascension.
It was the Assumption.
Yeah. No, it's the Ascension. Also, because you'll see that in the big Catholic calendar.
Aha.
That's how I know. It's Omaha, Newark, Philadelphia. It's a bunch of East Coast and Omaha. Yeah.
Must have had an East Coast bishop at one point.
Something. I don't know. But anyway, so that's a decision that's being made at a lower level because they know their people better. Mm-hmm. They know the life of the church in that area.
A lot of dioceses, sometimes they will go ahead and get something and get a resource that they give all of their parishes access to. But even with that, they tend to be fairly careful, and they will provide minimal support and resources, but then encourage the parishes to make the best decisions for what they're going to use for marriage prep or etc. That is oftentimes about how we practice this principle.
Yeah.
All the way down to the granular
level. It's up to, or like in a diocese, you can have certain little regulations or rules or tweaks, and then it's up to the pastor, right? It's up to an individual pastor how they want to handle altar servers. If they have girls be altar servers, or boys, or they have acolytes. That's up to the individual pastor because he is the local authority in that parish. So that is subsidiarity. We see the church do this. We hope, I'd say we see it in some things. It's not perfect for certain, but we see this in society, and we believe that this is the best way to do things because the people closest to the action get to make the decisions.
Did you want to read this other part in bold?
Yeah.
Okay.
The principle, 1885, the principle of subsidiarity is opposed to all forms of collectivism. It sets limits for state intervention. It aims at harmonizing the relationship between individuals and societies. It tends toward the establishment of true international order. Just kind of like, there you go. Just that little, this is why we do it.
All right. We are close to an hour.
We're going to wrap it up.
Let's start wrapping it up.
We're going to get a little bit practical,
Let's do
I'd
it.
say. So just kind of living it out is what I'm calling this section.
Some of these economic principles.
Yeah. So we're going to one little more thing here from the catechism and then just some like talking about stuff. All right. So it says an example. This is from 24, of course, 2434. A just wage is the legitimate fruit of work. To refuse or withhold it can be a grave injustice. In determining fair pay, both the needs and the contributions of each person must be taken into account. Remuneration for work should guarantee man the opportunity to provide a dignified livelihood for himself and his family on the material, social, cultural, and spiritual level, taking into account the role and productivity of each, the state of the business, and the common good. Agreement between the parties is not sufficient to justify morally the amount to be received in wages.
So just because this person walked up and signed on the dotted line that I will accept this payment does not necessarily mean it is justified morally.
Mm-hmm. So you are wildly underpaying those people.
If you are, yeah.
Picking the food or whatever it is. Well, they agreed to it. They're the ones accepting the job. That doesn't matter. That doesn't automatically make it morally acceptable.
But
so that flies in the face of just letting the invisible hand of the market take care of things.
It also doesn't say, yeah, you've got to pay them X.
Oh no, there's no minimum wage in the
no, but it
catechism.
Says fair, both the needs of the of the person and the contributions that they made ought to be taken into account, and that not only their material goods are not the only thing that we're aiming for. Okay, let me just slide a paycheck that's just going to keep a roof, food, and lights and gas in the tank. That's not enough. Social. That could be interpreted 1,000 ways. Cultural and spiritual. The remuneration of our work or our wages needs to be, the purpose of it is to support human life in all of its forms, in all of its capacities. It's not just to put food on the table. That's not it. Just keep me alive. And employers have that obligation to find a wage that isn't going to harm the business. That's immoral as well. When the state comes in and just tries to arbitrarily force a number that is not in alignment with what the business can responsibly provide, or it's out of alignment with the work the person even gives. This is a very detailed discussion that, again, the state just can't come down and just, it's not practicing subsidiarity to come down and just blanket this. And in some instances, it makes sense to pay somebody maybe less than it would another person. And this might be controversial.
Boy.
I don't know. Maybe I'm going to say the risky thing now.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to touch this one.
I don't know what you're going to say, but I think if you're an employer and you have different people coming and applying to your job, and one of them, again, maybe they had similar skill sets, but one of them was a single 22-year-old, and one of them was a married 45-year-old with 9 kids, and some of them in college and the rest younger. I think it's within your responsibility to discern that they would be paid different amounts because they have different obligations to be able, the younger person doesn't mean that they're not worth as much, but it's maybe not just to just say, okay, yeah, I would absolutely have to pay them the same amount that I would pay this person.
We want to pay equity and all that, right? We're not trying to gyp anybody.
No,
but the idea
I think it would
is
be like you feel responsible for that person, so you're going to be extra generous.
Yeah. I feel like it if Rich says this job gets paid X no matter what.
Yep.
I feel that is dehumanizing, and it's boiling that person down to a means of profit. There's nothing else about that person, just some of the work that they're doing and what you pay them for it. But if you look at the whole person, and of course there's going to be more contributions, and many times maybe that older person with the family and all that, maybe they can have a deeper contribution to the team too, because there's more experience and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, of course.
But you're thinking, I want this person to work here. And if I can't pay this guy X, he can't work here. And I really want him. I think it's going to be good for our business, for his coworkers, for everybody. I should pay him that. And maybe that could be different. And none of it's to rip anybody off. None of this is to enable you to pay an unjust wage to anyone. It's just the just wage might not mean that it is exactly the same for everybody.
Right. And I'm going to go so far as to say that I think when we talk about just wages, oftentimes I'm not arguing for what's the race to the bottom. What's the minimum I can pay somebody? I think it's actually the opposite.
Yes.
It's what can I pay so that this particular person in their particular circumstances can thrive. And I think in the church, and this is going to come out as a flat out criticism, but it needs to be said, it's a race to the bottom with what we pay our parish staff, our diocesan staff. On the board, there are exceptions. There are places that are doing this excellently and actually have pay structures that support human life and that support being able to take time after new life comes into the family, etc. But there are overwhelmingly in the church, this is a huge problem. And that's why we can't oftentimes keep incredible talent for all of their adult life. Why the church is only be able to hire 23-year-olds right out of college that have to then leave a couple of years later is because we're only willing to pay, the flat base salary to keep the lights on and the roof over the head and gas in the car. And then we scratch our heads wondering why we don't have, top-notch people working in and for the church. What we really need to be doing is, instead of just being budget restricted, is mission led and discerning, okay, I want these people on the team. What's it going to cost? And then trusting that the Lord's going to provide for that and actually paying your staff justly in a way that's going to allow them to thrive and not to see the candidate walking through the door that maybe does have a lot of children as the burden, or not to see the young woman in her fertility bearing years as, a risk because she might leave. That's unacceptable. And I'm going to call the church out on that. I'll call the society out on it, but I'm going to call the church out on this particularly. We need to be paying better. We need to actually discern this. The just wage, just because people are willing to accept what you're paying them, does not mean that it is moral. Oops.
There you go. And in order for that to happen, though, if you want your parish to pay your people better and be able to hire maybe like more qualified or like better at that job people,
you got to be giving.
You probably need to be giving more because they can only pay what they've got.
Yep. And
so we want you to be incredibly generous so that they can be incredibly just. Ooh.
Just came up with a little phrase?
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if it makes it on a t-shirt. All right. Want to just get to some other really quick practicals. We did this earlier, but I just do want to throw it in because it's a food example.
I love food.
Helpful and good, in my opinion, intervention by the state. Food labeling laws. I love food label. Maybe not all food labeling laws.
Like it has gluten in it.
Yes,
That's
but
super
I'm
helpful
saying,
for me.
yes. I'm saying.
Like it has calories?
It says ice cream.
Oh,
or
okay.
it says frozen dairy dessert. Because a frozen dairy dessert, which you might be eating without knowing it.
It's not ice cream.
Maybe some of the times you are going to know it. But it's full of all just these like oils and stuff instead of milk fat. Maybe there's more air in it than is allowed in ice cream. So you're buying more nothing. and it's just full of junk.
Don't buy
When
frozen
ice
dairy
cream, seriously, don't do it. Ice cream has to be made out of dairy. There has to be a certain amount of milk fat. There can only be so much air. And then that's why it's also helpful to see the premium ice cream, the super premium, right? There's a law passed if something says light, whether that's light dip or light ice cream, like I think it has to be 50% or less fat than the comparable like thing that it would be ice cream for ice cream, chips for chips, etc. Whether that is a good thing or not, I don't know.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, for people with allergies.
I'm saying the reduced fat stuff, but like
let's move
for
on
it
from
to
the ice cream.
Anyway, I want some ice cream.
It is a good
It's
thing.
That's so
to
good.
be able to pick up a product
and know what it is,
know
what's
what
in
is
it.
in it.
Or that they have to list the ingredients and they have to do it in order. That's just think if there were
That's
no
really
ingredient
helpful.
labels.
Except, but there can be bad intervention there too. Except
Yes,
that
there
when you
can.
turn the label and it's all absolute trash, poison, carcinogens, garbage food. Now I can make an informed decision to put it back on the shelf
Yes.
and just move on. But they don't always have to tell me that they sprayed all of my produce with whatever. You know, even the organic label sometimes, we don't really have that
the
completely
organic
locked
label.
in. And, you know, we've heard stories of some farmers just being a little downwind from the not organic crop, and they relied on winds spraying over. You know, this happens. And so there are bad things there too. Or when the government will step in and just subsidize copious amounts of corn and soy and then pump our food full of nasty things that are going to kill us, that are killing us and giving us cancer.
Effects.
That is no good. So there's both and there.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
But the big idea here, I want us to be able to see beyond this false dichotomy of entirely unrestricted free market and any suggestion of regulation is not allowed versus you own nothing and love it. Communism.
Right.
It's not an all or nothing black and white issue. The church teaches us, remember, that reasonable regulation of the marketplace and economic initiatives in keeping with a just hierarchy of values and a view to the common good is to be commended. That is what we are called to do.
Bada bing, bada boom. Third time was a charm?
I hope. We'll see if it saves.
Please, Lord, let this save.
But thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the Catholic Money Show as we dive into these. And of course, I don't even know if we dove into it at all. We kind of just dipped our toe into all the things that the church teaches. Like we essentially were just talking about some bits from the catechism.
Oh, we could have spent an hour on maybe any
writings
one of those
the
paragraphs.
saints, on encyclicals, on just philosophers and all that. Like there's so much here.
More.
So please keep joining us. If you are newer to the show, hit subscribe, whether that's on YouTube or your podcast app. And if you liked it, share this show with somebody. That's how it grows, how we get the word out. So, hey, check out this episode. This is a good episode. So if you're listening right now, hit the little share icon. Send a text to somebody. Hey, check this out. That'd be really great. That would help us reach more folks so more people can understand how to use their money, can transform it from a source of worry and anxiety into peace in a way that helps them say yes to God in their life.
Amen. Leave a review, leave a comment. We'll be back next time. Bye for now.
This episode is sponsored by the Catholic Financial Planners Network.